Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast, and in this case, Mormon News Podcast. I'm your host, John Dehlin. It is June 6th, 2018, and as always, we're very excited for the panel that we have pulled together today. As we're trying to do on Mormon Stories, we have pulled together the week's news, and our goal for now is to review it with various panelists and just to talk about it. The main subject of discussion today is going to be the recent BeOne event that was held June 1st, 2018, where the LDS Church celebrated the 40th anniversary of its lifting of the ban on priesthood to black males and of temple blessings and full temple access to all people of African descent. So that's going to be the main thing that we're talking about. We're also going to be talking about the weekend news and a few other stories. Before we jump in, we just want to remind everyone, as we always do, that we have a few events coming up. The core mission of the Open Stories Foundation and Mormon Stories Podcast is to support Mormons who are struggling in a religious or a faith transition in their marriages, raising kids, with health, with mental health, with spirituality, with finding community, with mixed faith marriages, etc. So without going into much detail, go to mormonstories.org/events. You'll learn that this weekend we have a retreat in Park City, June 8th through 10th. In Houston, July 13th through 15th, we have a retreat. Idaho Falls, August 10th through 11th. Portland, Oregon, August 17th through 18th. The Bahamas Cruise is October 24th through 28th. And the Sacramento Workshop is November 2nd through 3rd. We do have, thanks to the generous donations of several donors, we do have scholarships available. You have to pay for your food. But if you want to attend one of these events, you can email us at staff@openstoriesfoundation.org and apply to attend one of these events on scholarship. Or if you can't afford it, we've priced them very low. You can just sign up and register now for Park City or any of the upcoming events. We really want to encourage you to join us. So please do. These events really help people. So that is the news that we have for today. What I'm now very excited to do is to introduce our amazing panel. Everyone on our panel today has done one, if not several, Mormon Stories interviews and or appeared in past Mormon News Podcast episodes. So I'm going to introduce each one and ask each of you to give yourselves a brief introduction. The person that I'll welcome first to today's panel is Julienna Viegas. Julienna, welcome back to Mormon News Podcast and Mormon Stories.
Hi, thank you for having me. I think people in the Mormon Stories community kind of know who I am by now. I've done a few podcasts and a couple of newsroom. So what can I say? So I've written, several op-eds in the Salt Lake Tribune. I did a Mormon story. I'm a voice for, minorities in the church still, even though I am not active at this time. I still have links, through family, friends, and I stay plugged in some. So I'm happy to participate and share some thoughts today.
We love having you, Julienna. Welcome. All right. The next guest that we want to introduce is Sean Carter, who again is joining us not for the first time. Sean, tell us a bit about yourself.
Let's see. I'm offended that I even have to do this. I thought everyone in the Mormon community, including, by the way, one of the apostles. That is my claim to fame, and I think I'm going to be. Am I the only member on the panel who has met an apostle? And Dieter Orkdorf and I are on first name basis. I call him D Money. I'm not just famous within the Exmo community, but very closely tied in with the apostles. If you don't know who I am, you'll find out during the podcast. I want to hear more from Darren. I got to tell you, and I shouldn't have told you this on pre-production, but I want to embarrass Darren a little bit. Dr. Darron Smith is one of the reasons I joined the church. I listened to his early podcast. This is like what, Mormon Stories 7. And hearing his testimony, and even though he was kind of on the way out, was really a big influence for me. So I'm kind of a fanboy here, and I'm looking forward to being on this panel with Darren.
All right. And Sean Carter is a lawyer and a comedian, and I'll just say that for you. Well, Darron Smith, that's a nice introduction. Darren, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. That's fantastic. I mean, I wasn't expecting that. So this is my Wakanda time, baby. Appreciate that, man. So you've seen the evolution from the time I started to where I am today. And I mean, I'm no stranger to this community. Like I said, I feel real proud of the fact that I was one of the first persons on the show. And I remember John and I had just a delightful conversation. And I still get people who email me from all those years, we did that about that particular episode. So that was my introduction to the work that John does. And I want to say that my work has continued in terms of what I do professionally. Is I teach at a university here in Memphis, and I still write about Mormon issues. Even though, like Julienna, I'm not really active in the church, but I still champion members of color trying to find a space where they can find peace. And I'll continue to do that as long as I have breath and interest. So, but I appreciate being on this absolutely fantastic committee. Looking forward to hearing from all of you tomorrow. Is someone else here?
Yeah, we have one last panelist. Last but not least, Sarah Newcomb, we always love having you. Can you just give us a quick little introduction? Welcome back.
Hi, yeah, I have also been on Mormon Stories podcast, and I currently on the Midnight Truth website. And I am somewhat of an activist for just truth, putting truth out there, and having having a place for people that have experienced unique experiences to land, at least in the Native American and South American and Pacific Island communities. But anything kind of surrounding racial issues, I get a little passionate about. And,
All right. Well, Sarah, it's always great to have you back. And again, the website's Lamanite Truth, right?
Yes, LamaniteTruth.com.
Okay. Welcome. All right. So we've got a lot to cover today. And the first thing that we wanted to cover was some of the latest stories in the news. And I think this first one, Sarah, we want to give you first dibs on covering it. This is from Fox News. It says, Judge won't dismiss lawsuit against LDS Church over sex abuse claims. And if I'm just reading a little bit more, it's basically saying a Navajo tribal court judge has refused a request by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to dismiss lawsuits alleging sex abuse in a church-run program. And as we go on, it basically talks about the Lamanite student placement program and how in the 60s and 70s, there were several children who were sexually abused as a part of the program. My understanding is that this lawsuit has attempted to subpoena Thomas S. Monson, who has since passed. But anyway, the church tried to get the case dismissed, and we have a judge saying, I'm not going to dismiss this case. So Sarah, as somebody who identifies as Native American, do you have any initial responses to this story?
Well, I was actually really excited and kind of impressed by the Navajo judge, but looking at this just from a business standpoint, because this is a little bit thankfully separate from beliefs or anything that's going to get too personal for people. This is just great business. These children were taken out of their homes and put into this program, but the program was kind of placed on the Navajo reservation. Like the people weren't going out and finding the program. The program was located also on the reservation, and the children would be taken out as part of that. So the Navajo judge basically, where is the quote? I found a quote, but she basically was pointing out that they found that the tribal courts have jurisdiction because the program was based there. And one of the other aspects of it is one of the Navajo fundamental beliefs is that children shouldn't be harmed. And so you're going to find a lot of passion coming from the Navajo Nation about these circumstances and what the children went through. And just from a business aspect, the program wasn't only run off of the reservation. It was also run on the reservation in recruitment and finding the children and baptizing them into the program. They'd have to get baptized to go into the program. So there's a lot of interesting aspects to it, but looking up in the news, it is all over the place. This isn't a small news story. There are pages and pages of of different news articles and different newspapers and people that have picked up the story. So I'm interested to see how it unfolds. Just in
And let me just ask you emotionally, how does it feel just emotionally in terms of justice or vindication? Do you have any emotional things you want to share?
You just had to go there. Woo. Darn it, John. When it comes to children, standing up for what they experienced, especially those that haven't had power, those that haven't been listened to. This is one reason why even Sam Young is just like this huge hero of mine, because it's all about the children. This isn't about beliefs. This isn't about choices of people long ago that created a religion. This isn't about religion itself. This is about the business side of things and the legality side of things, and seeing some justice come from, not that even there's justice yet, but there is in some ways, because the Navajo Nation has at least stood up for their people, and they have enough power to at least say, no, this isn't right. Where it'll go from here, I don't know, but it happened not just within Mormonism, this idea of taking children out of their homes, and the idea of save the man, kill the Indian. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, John, but that was kind of what was the driving force behind all the families being ripped apart. But yeah, I'm really excited to see some movement in addressing that. Yeah, it happened. I think one of the biggest things that causes pain isn't trying to find some perfect closure, or there's no going back. There's no changing the past, but not denying it happened, not, having it acknowledged and validated. And these people are people that are still alive, and, the people that experienced it, this affected their entire lives. And it didn't just affect the person abused, it affected the entire communities, the entire Navajo Nation. And in some ways, this one case, this happening, it's not just going to affect people that were affected by the Lamanite or Mormon program. It's going to also affect Native American communities all over America that experience being taken out of their homes and having families ripped apart to be put into church or state-run schools to save the man, kill the Indian. So yeah, I'm pretty emotional about it, but I don't want to take up time because there's other stuff to go over.
No, this is important stuff. I have to say that it's a little, and thank you, Sarah, for being willing to share. I have to say I don't understand it. It's hard for me to reconcile a church named after Jesus that is trying to dismiss a lawsuit where they're being viewed as culpable for sexual abuse of a child. Sean Carter, you're an attorney. I know that churches have legal rights. I know that someone must be proven, innocent until proven guilty. How do we make sense of the fact that can a church have liability and own up to it, and not try and have a case dismissed? Is there some middle ground here, or does the church have to just act like a corporation and do all the things that a corporation would do, or is there a middle ground as a lawyer?
No, well, and here's the thing is, while you do have a right to defend yourself, you do not have an obligation to do so. So you certainly could, the church in any institution could admit fault, could agree to some type of restitution. Churches do this on a confidential basis. So they don't publicly admit fault. They simply pay people, right, to their claims, but privately. It's interesting here, though, because for some reason it just seems impossible for large religious institutions to do the right thing in this kind, or assuming that I believe the allegations are true, to do the right thing. We see the same thing with the Catholic Church, or any other large institution, where it just seems to be they act like corporations. Now, if you're a corporation, you do have an obligation to preserve the company's capital and all that. But in a religious institution, there is no obligation that they fight this lawsuit. But the natural inclination for most individuals and most institutions seems to be to never admit fault, to do so reluctantly, if ever, and to draw out the pain of the victims. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, in my ideal world, the church would look into these situations, see if they're guilty. If they're guilty, make a payout or make some sort of restitution or admit it. And then if they say, no, this is a false claim, they would say that and they would fight it. But it seems like they're on lawyer autopilot with Curtin and McConkie, and it's really sad to see. Sarah, did you have a response to Sean?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's the whole point is just with what he said, is it's their choice. It's their choice whether they want to run it as a business or run it as a spiritual leading the world, and more often than not, it seems like it falls back into the business mode rather than the spiritual. And that's why, I look at what's happening with the Navajo Nation purely on the business side of things, because time and time again, that's how it's approached from the church.
On the one hand, I get it. We know they have hundreds of billions of dollars in assets that they're trying to protect. On the other hand, I'm thinking, would it be that awful to settle? Like, could you afford a couple million or 5 million or 10 million if literally you've been culpable for some sort of abuse? And I just think there's so much money, they feel like they've got to protect it. I don't know.
I'm not sure it's just the money they're trying to protect. I think a lot more of it is just image and the institution. I think if they could have quieted this with money, they would have, but I'm guessing that the Navajo people weren't gonna do that. They weren't gonna go down quietly without a fight. So, or they were underestimated. There's every chance of that they were underestimated.
We did see in that West Virginia case recently that the folks in West Virginia did settle. So sometimes people do, and they need to. Really quickly, Darren and Julienna, do either of you have a quick comment about this case?
I was, not this case in particular, but I was going to ask Sarah if she's aware of anybody, or maybe any of you are you aware of anyone who's done work around this topic, who maybe interviewed survivors of this program in the 60s, and some of the stories that they can tell about what happened? I know a couple of people. I was thinking about doing this with Cardell Jacobson, but he's since retired. I just wanted to know, has anyone done this work? Looked and interviewed these people, talked to them about the program. I mean, did a really honest scholarly work on it, and that's is anyone aware of that? I'm not.
There's been a lot of interviews of people that were in the program. Most of them are inspirational interviews. So as far as a variety of experiences, I haven't seen a lot of in-depth, balanced interviews. It's usually interviews with an agenda that I've found.
That sounds like a good project for the Lamanite Truth Initiative.
Yeah,
maybe.
It really does.
Not to give you work, Sarah. I'm sure you've got a lot going on.
No, that's something that I could definitely get.
Sarah, do you have access to that population?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I used to work down in Blanding, Four Corners region, so I kind of know that area. I know some people down there. I was gonna. What my plan was to get a sample of people down there and a sample of people here. I was going to look at their telomeres to see if there's any environmental processes in the region that might shorten or lengthen telomeres in that population. Telomeres are end caps on molecules or DNA. As we get older, they unravel, and it shows either we're getting chronologically, we're getting older, or we're being succumbed by disease. So diseases that are social in nature that impact upon our health and well-being, like mainly being shamed, blamed, discriminated against, things that we've been talking about. Those are the things that we know now from neuroscience are absolutely super important when talking about racism and the impact of discrimination. So it's no longer just the social impact of discrimination. And I think that's what I think the depthness of it is that it really does get beneath the skin. And at the end of the day, it kills people. And these processes are intergenerationally transferred from one generation to the next, right? These traumatic endeavors that marginalized groups have had to deal with. And the church, and this is the way I look at it with all these institutions, y'all, is that the church, when the church was conceived of as an institution, it had the wonderful words and pretty boxes and all that, but it really didn't conceptualize what to do with people of color, like most white institutions. Now, what do we do with the people that we've marginalized, that are marginalized? How do we reconcile that? So they spent 130 years trying to figure that out. And so the pain for Black people is this constant second-class citizenship, sort of membership where they function behind the scenes in the sense that they don't get the same love and respect that the white members get simply because of the historical circumstances of the church. And,
right.
and like other white organizations, right, they weren't prepared for Black people or any other people for that matter. Gay,
right.
lesbian, don't matter, Native American.
Juliana, did you want to jump in real quick?
So as far as the Navajo, I'm not very familiar with this, but I would agree with the thoughts that the church does a lot to protect its image. It's not so much about the money, I would think. I also believe that if they could quiet things down, they would, because they have the means to. But it's image, always, trying to push things aside, not look at it, to dissociate from it. Hoping that it will get buried, like a lot of things do in the church. So I can see it's kind of a pattern that I see happening a lot, even as we will talk a little bit later with the celebration, quote unquote. I have a lot of thoughts about that because the church is a way of acting that is, we're not going to look at it. We're just going to shine light on what is and what is working for us, which a lot of things are. And so they have a lot to play with in order to camouflage the things that are, I don't know if you want me to say this now or later, but it's beautiful to celebrate, the African community within the church, but show me the leaders, that are not, specifically in their country. Show me the leaders at the head of the church. How many Black leaders are there?
Yeah, it's a minority. It's a minority for sure.
But even like among, headquarters, if you're going to be so inclusive, prove it, show it. Like, don't talk about it. Just show me that you trust these people, and they can be an apostle. They can be, anything you can be. Because it's one thing to put people up front and do cover like they've done for many years. Like, when the Mormon Tabernacle Choir has one or two Black people, like the cameras on them all the time, like to show that we're inclusive and we have diversity. But to me it's and again, maybe we should start with the positive things that came out of that celebration, and
totally
talk about what wasn't there.
Okay, well, Sarah, thank you for being willing to come on to give us your thoughts on that. Yeah. We know that you are going to be able to join us for the full time, so stay with us for as long as you'd like. But mostly thank you for being willing to give us your perspective on that news story.
Thank you, Sarah.
And we'll cover it more in the weeks and months ahead as we hear more about the story. Is that all right?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. A couple other quick things in the news that are worth mentioning. So it looks like the President Russell M. Nelson of the LDS Church has asked members and specifically teens to ditch social media for 7 days. On the one hand, I think that this makes sense. Even in my family, even with me, not alone my wife and kids, we're all using social media too much. And so a fast probably has some good things associated with it. Others want to say that this is a way for the church to keep information from its members, specifically around the issues of the $32 billion Mormon leaks thing, reactions to BeOne, any of the stuff around the race problems. Panelists, do any of you want to give an opinion about the requested 7-day fast?
I have to tell you, I think for the reason you said, it's a good idea just generally. I don't think it's possible. I'm 50 years old, and I can tell you I couldn't do it. I got suspended for Facebook for 1 day. I was in 1 day of Facebook jail. It was the worst day of my entire life. I'll tell you, it was May 1st, 2018. I remember for the rest of my life. It is my, the day I got out of Facebook jail, May 2nd, is Juneteenth for me. That's my day of liberation. It was horrible. I got to tell you, it is very addictive. And here's the thing about it is a connecting force. I realized, John, that day I thought I was never going to get back on Facebook again. I'm not sure I have a way to contact you. All right. I certainly didn't have a way to get in touch with Darren or Julienna or 200 other people that I'd like to hear from their opinions very often and regularly. It is a huge force. It really is. And the question I think we should do another time is to talk about what's been called racebook and the way in which Facebook, through their algorithms, kind of tamps down conversations on diversity, et cetera, by its word policing, et cetera. And I think Darren, Darren, have you ever been in Facebook jail?
No, I was in Facebook jail recently, but I'm just interested to hear you say that.
Yeah, well, what happens is there are a lot of Black activists who have a problem on Facebook. Here's why. If you use certain words, like they say the N-word, okay, even in a proper historical context, that can get flagged by a user who's offended by it. And Facebook doesn't have a black people can use that word rule, right? So if you're a Black person and you use that word, like I said, even in the right context, if you're turned in by someone, you go to jail. And they don't have any way to filter between those things. So if you're an African-American person, you ever notice, for instance, like a lot of people use white people, but they'll use WYPIPO. Yeah. They're trying to avoid the Facebook filter that will say, hey, if you make a disparaging claim about any group of people, then Facebook will say, hey, that's a violation of our community standards. And this is a different story. But the point is, though, John, get back to John's story. Honestly, can any of us go a week without any social media?
I can.
Julienna can.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a different household here. Like I don't even own a TV in my house, so.
You must be totally.
I do get news. I listen to NPR, and I can plug in if I want to plug in. Of course, and I use, in fact, social media if I want to know, some of the stuff. But I have other sources. But I don't dislike the idea of I take social media for my kids. I mean, they're still young and I don't want them on screens all the time, and there's good and bad, and I want them to be able to live in the real world without social media and without, being on a screen. But I do know that when the church does something, it's usually because there's a bigger reason behind. So I don't, and of course there is all these things that are positive, but it could be also that, yes, they don't want them to hear about all the, the backlash for some of the things they've been accused of doing, and the reaction of certain people. So, I don't know. I don't know. I do know that there's always, the church never does something that's not like super calculated with bigger reasons behind, just because I've researched and dig into that, and I know how they work. So
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. A couple other stories, and then let's get to the main one. There's a report coming out of the Daily Herald that the all LDS missionaries are being transferred out of Nicaragua. I don't know if that means that. I guess it's reportedly related to continued violence and political unrest in Nicaragua, and so I guess they don't want the missionaries to be hurt there. Incidentally, I received a really interesting message from a listener in Mexico who wrote, "Hola Juan, I don't know if you're aware of the area program in Mexico to close stakes, wards, and branches. I live in Monterrey, and at least they just closed one stake a week ago in many wards. This program started a few years ago, closing 2 stakes in Guadalajara, and is going on in the entire country. You may have more context than I do." And they're saying that the reason why is they want to have better wards. But the truth, according to this listener, is that many people are not attending church and that people are not paying tithing. And now there are lots of empty buildings. So he's recommending that we cover this as a topic. So interesting things going on in Latin America. Any comments from panelists on that before we jump into the main, kind of the main topic?
I think Tim Heaton knows a lot about that. He's a professor at BYU. I think he's still there. Cardell knows a lot about that. I think Peggy Fletcher Stack also looks at that, looks at the demographic changes in that region too. And I know that South America has been growing in leaps and bounds in terms of Protestant evangelical type faiths, but faiths that are more like Mormon, very sterile Protestant kind of based faith traditions are losing favor. The Catholic Church, unless they're there's a specific term for Catholics who are very much into activism, liberation theology, practitioners in that region. And that's happening all over the world, not just in South America. We're seeing the same thing in Africa as well. So white European-based churches like the Mormon Church are no longer interesting places where people go and gather and get their spiritual message from. They're being eclipsed by the Holy Rollers and the evangelicals in the South and other regions of the country who have a different style about them, different style of oration.
All right. Well, I think unless anybody else has something to say about that, I think that covers kind of the major news stories. And now I think it's time to go ahead and jump into the BeOne reactions to the BeOne celebration. So does anybody want to set up what BeOne was about for those who have been under a rock and don't know? Who wants to take a stab at it?
I can. I mean, you're gonna fill in because I may forget some things, but mostly I think the church is reacting to what's been happening for many years, but these past couple of years, I think lots of people, including myself, have written about why don't we hear from you about apologies, the fact that the last one in the church is to accept people of color, like 1978. It's way late, and I think they've been studying because the church always moves very slowly and very carefully and very religiously, politically correctly. I think they've been preparing this probably for several years, for a couple of years at least. How are we going to address this? And I believe the BeOne is their response to the things that people have been asking, which is not an apology, but it's, listen, things are going well, leave in the past what's in the past. Look, we have tons of happy, people of color among us, and let's focus on that. And so of the celebration itself, so it happened in Salt Lake in the conference center. It was a packed, full. The place was full. It was very, very well done. It was, to look at, the positive. I think it was refreshing to see, people of color up on the scene themselves. It was a different feel. I want to say that Alex Boye, but mostly Gladys Knight has. Oh, sorry, am I going too far?
Yeah, we're going to cover it in depth, and so
Okay,
I just wanted to kind of give people
say
an
what it was
understanding of
about.
kind of
Right.
what the general thing was. So,
Okay.
Thank you for giving us that summary. Let me start with the question for all three of you. As I've been preparing for this discussion, I realized that in many ways this event wasn't for anyone here who's on this panel. All of us have left the church. I'm not a person of color. I'm an ex-Mormon. None of you go to church. And so is there even a place, as we're about to go dive in, I'm curious if any of you feel like it's still even fair for you to be sharing your thoughts or opinions about this. So Sean, why don't you start? Is it even relevant for you to be sharing your opinion or not?
Oh, absolutely. See, I was black a long time before I was Mormon. All right. And so I keep a little black cred in my back pocket at all times. I'm going to stay black. Don't really have a choice. And also because, like you said, the audience, by the way, for this is not just those people in the conference center. And it certainly wasn't white Mormons because they didn't care. They were at Pride. Let me tell you, we'll talk about that. Let me tell you what the real audience was. The real audience is for the people who are not members of the church, all right, in America, who are looking at the Mormons. It's the same audience as Meet the Mormons, all right? It's trying to have the churches, to show the church as being this progressive organization that has moved past its horrible racist past and is celebrating the inclusion of these people and basically trying to say, hey, we're just like everybody else. Right? We're a regular mainstream Christian religion. We've gotten rid of this fringe racial element. And so it's like I said, the same argument for the Meet the Mormon people, Meet the Mormon audience, which is why the Meet the Mormons always featured people that you would never meet in a Mormon church. Right? African American, Native American, boxing champions, that type of thing. And so as long as the church is still, trying to play that shell game, I'm bringing.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let.
Okay. Yeah.
Piece, but then I do want to answer your question. Like, do I have a right, quote unquote, to even express how I feel about this? But I'm gonna let Darren.
I was gonna tackle that question just from my own perspective.
Just to be clear, I don't mean right. I mean, is it relevant? Is it fair? And it's a hypothetical. Go ahead, Darren.
It's a good question. It's a good question. And I say, hell yeah. I paid my dues, dog. I've been in the church for a whole hell of a long time and put up with a lot of bullshit when I was in the church. And so, yeah, I feel like I have a voice there. And what I saw in the 40th celebration is more of the same stuff that I saw in the last celebration. If they do the same theme every time, it's just different configurations of it, but it's the same stuff that I see every single time. So, what I thought would have been, and I don't know if we're going to address this, but I just wanted to say this about it. What would have been so nice about this one, it's just an apology. How hard would it be to say, we screwed up, y'all? I mean, look around. We too white. We screwed up. We've offended our black brothers and sisters. We've harmed our black brothers and sisters. And we want to say, before we can really have a commemoration or a celebration, we need to set the record straight by apology. Why not just start with that? It would have made that thing so much more to bomb. If dude would have said that, but they like I said, you talked about their image. They're so image conscious, and clearly it's not working for them.
There is more to it. Sorry,
please, Julienna.
I want to let you finish, but there's the image, but someone interestingly, I'm not going to say names, but it's someone, a friend of mine. She's white. She's in the church. She's progressive, but she's very active. But she raised the point when we were talking about these things, because she's open to trying to, she's, the right kind of people to be in the church right now, who kind of pushes the boundaries. But she brought up the fact that something that the church may actually be afraid of with the apology is not just the image. I mean, yes, there's the image, but is the liability issue. because opening that door could possibly invite people for lawsuits. And how many people, you don't know. And under certain laws, they would have to, to settle or take care of it. I mean, it could open a gate that is very, very scary for the church. But again, I mean, what do? Do you do what you preach, or do you protect yourself and your assets? I mean, that's
yeah.
So, because, I listened to Elder Oaks talk, and he came close many times, right? They all talk about their, which I know it's true, that he was so touched and he cried when he heard the announcement. I have no doubt. My mission president said the exact same thing to me, most years ago when I served, and that when he received, the news, he was on, driving on the freeway, and he heard the news on the radio that the priesthood had been extended to, everyone, people of color. He stopped the car, bawled, because he always was so uncomfortable with it. I know this particular experience happened to many, many members. Just like today. Yes, go ahead.
I heard that experience from many members. That's the same story, by the way, that Mitt Romney tells. Exactly.
They all have the same.
I knew he was going to say that.
And I don't dismiss the story, but
How do I dismiss the story if everybody has the same story? Was every Mormon in the car at that moment? Because think about it, that's ridiculous. Back to the story, his impression.
Most people commute probably at that time when it was.
But just to be fair, Oaks wasn't in the car. Oaks was shoveling. He was shoveling with his son at his cabin.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I get it. The point was they were all stopped, and were just overcome with joy or whatever. But and I said that's their own experience. What I haven't seen throughout this presentation or ever is, have you ever taken a minute and thought about how people of color felt either at that moment or before? And what do you have to say to that? Or how do you acknowledge that? Because it's me, and how I felt, and I was so overjoyed, and okay, but you know what? It wasn't your problem. Somebody else's problem.
Okay, we'll cover that, because they did talk about a lot of people's feelings. So a couple. Someone want to say something?
Well, let me get just 1 second about this. And I don't
Go ahead,
know,
Sean.
we're not going to litigate that issue, but here's what's strange about that comment to me is that Oak said it himself. He said he accepted the words of the prophets and was okay with the ban. He was going to support it. He didn't like it, but he was going to support it because the word of God. And then it changes the next day, and now he is weeping for something that he never cared about in the first place. You see what I'm saying?
So he said, I've got a quote here. I observed the pain and frustration experienced by those who suffered these restrictions and those who criticized them and sought for reasons. I studied the reasons then being given and could not feel confirmation of the truth of any of them. So basically, Bruce R. McConkie's justifications, Joseph Fielding Smith, Brigham Young, he's saying he never bought any of what his fellow apostles or prophets were saying. And then he says, as part of my prayerful study, I learned that in general, the Lord rarely gives reasons for the commandments and directions he gives to his servants. And so this is a key theme. I determined to be loyal to our prophetic leaders and to pray, as promised from the beginning of these restrictions, that the day would come when all would enjoy the blessings of priesthood and temple. So he's basically saying he never bought any of the reasons, but the Lord doesn't give reasons. And so he just prayed that the restriction would be lifted. What do you guys think about that?
Basically, I'm going to throw you under the bus.
Okay.
I'm going to throw you under the bus. And again, I mean, to me, it says to me very plainly that the church never had a place for black people. The presence of blacks in the church had to push the church to do things and make concessions, like most white organizations. But the church had no interest in black people. They didn't contemplate about what to do about black people. And they felt they have from an organizational standpoint, they feel like they don't have any. That question you asked earlier, Julienna, is a really good question that we'll hope we dive into a little bit. But to me, it smacks of empathy, right? Being able to understand another person's pain, another person's suffering. And I think that in large part, for a lot of white Americans, as it pertains to people of color, African Americans in particular, they have no empathy for people of color, for black people. And that's something they've inherited from their friends and family and society at large. And that might be one reason that I think that we get such these like what you said before, John. I hope the listeners really took that in, what he's saying here, what Oaks is saying about these teachings and the impact that it had on him is significant. So for me,
but he's saying he had empathy. He cried. He just didn't believe the excuses. Are you not buying it?
Here's the thing, man. At some point you got to stand up for justice. You got to stand up for truth. And what he's saying to me is he understood, that some of the stuff that was being taught was not consistent with what he felt should be right, or should be more followed in the church, although he didn't phrase it like that. But then you have to act on that.
Yep.
The loyalty thing, you come in with the loyalty pledge, the kiss the ring thing.
Do you think that President Kimball was bothered enough to do something about it?
I think he was pressured into it.
See, I think what Oaks is saying is that I didn't buy any of those reasons. But the fact that the restriction was in place meant that there must have been another good reason that I just don't know yet. But God didn't like black people until 1978. All right, I'm confident on that one. Okay.
But this is what I hear him saying. I hear him sort of pinning it on God, and he's basically saying that God doesn't give excuses. God just gives commandments, and it's our job to obey God. And so basically, he's just saying that it was God's commandment, so he followed God's commandment.
How convenient for him, right?
Yes, it doesn't make sense at all, because why would God enlighten so many other people before the Mormon church and not them? If they're supposed to be leading in the number one church, God's church, only true church on the earth, why would God give to the only one church on the earth the last, be the last to do the right thing, and everybody else before them already did it? Like, that's not very inspired, is it?
No, it's not.
But he's saying God works in mysterious ways. We don't understand God's ways.
But you know what, though? You know what? Let's cut to the chase and get to what the real issue is about. It's about white supremacy, right? We're talking about God as if we're really talking about deity. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a man who's interpreting God through the prism of a white lens. That happens to be a white male lens, and all the experiences that he's had in his life. That's what we're talking about, and we're conflating these two terms. I wish we quit using God. I want to use God the way that Julienna uses God. I don't see God that way. I just don't see deity as being this author of confusion over this kind of stuff.
Yep.
I think that as humans, we have to work it out, figure out a way to work this stuff out. But we can't quit. We have to quit relying on, I guess, this sort of idea that God did it and God's gonna fix it. I just don't buy that.
It's an easy way out.
It is.
And God works in mysterious ways. It's always.
But here's the thing:
when it's convenient.
Right.
But I have some sympathy with the church here. Here's why I say so. Is that, and even in Oaks somewhat alluded to it. He talked about how once the church got the revelation in 70, it moved forward, which is not exactly true. All right, but that the members kind of lagged behind.
Yeah, he was honest about that.
It moved forward. What now, Sean? You said it moved forward. What?
Of all of our, restrictions on race immediately. We melded the congregations together. He kind of moved the church moved quickly, but the members kind of dragged their feet behind. And he talked about specifically how members, really hadn't changed in heart and mind, and it took them longer to come along. I think the truth of the matter is this: is that the church, for all of its mantra about a prophetic mantle, what the church most often does is it draws the bullseye around the arrow. What the members decide to do is what the church then makes doctrine. So why the word of wisdom, for instance, only the parts of the word of wisdom the members were willing to accept became part of the word of wisdom. Now, the part about, the meat, members weren't willing to give up those cheeseburgers, so they said, hey, we'll leave that out as optional. Okay, and we see that with here, where I think what the church did was, the truth of the matter is this: members of the church might have, or the leadership might have thought before 1978 that we should move forward, but they knew their membership wasn't ready. they'll say God knew, God, the timing is off. Yeah, the timing is off because the members aren't ready for this. They're not going to accept it. And you're moving along, slowly. But the church, can't claim that it was after 1978, it changed all of its racist doctrine because one, it never repudiated the reasons, right? Valiance, the curse. They were teaching members that all the way through into the 21st century. I got into the church in 2011, and the handbook, one of the youth handbooks, discouraged interracial dating. This is in 2011.
Wow.
And it basically said you should get with people who are equally yoked. So you should date within your socioeconomic circle, within your racial group.
This is in 2011 publication.
Absolutely.
So
Probably might be still in there now. John, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think Sarah has showed us that there's some of that stuff that's either only recently been removed or is still there for sure.
Yeah.
they looked around the church and seen how to.
That way of saying that, there's a symbiotic relationship here, right? Where the membership, the church, the leaders say, oh, no, we're in charge and we're running the bus. But the truth of the matter is what they try to do is figure out what the members are willing to accept and then say, these are the rules because compliance is important. And they know the members will not comply if they don't agree. So the greatest example, and John taught me this, was the birth control restriction. So apostle gets up in the 70s, says, we're not going to do birth control anymore. The members say, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And have that restriction anymore.
That happened with oral sex too. Spence W. Kimball said no more oral sex. Everyone revolted in the early 80s, and within 6 months, that was changed. Yeah.
And so, the members are loyal to a point, but they will at some point. And so, if the argument might be that if they had tried in 1965 to put down this restriction, the members would have said, no. Or sorry, they had tried to, we're not letting them in the temple.
Yeah, that's
there is internal pushbacks. There's internal pushbacks, but there is also social pushbacks, and this is what we're seeing now too. And eventually, it's like polygamy, and I believe it's the same thing. Like at some point, the church has to choose between: are we going to keep looking weird, or are we going to be accepting like others? And it's usually the last minute. The last minute where it's like, okay, are we going to retreat in the mountains and be our own, weird people like the FLDS? Or do we still want to be mainstream and accepted by the rest of the world, which, we're not from this world, but they do care about being accepted by the world they don't want to be a part of, which is completely a weird
Let
concept.
me ask you.
Well, down here in the South.
So because
down
even
here,
with
down here, Mormons aren't looked at kindly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt anybody. I said Mormons down in this region of the country don't look favorably upon Mormons. So in the South,
and in the rest of the world too. Yes, overall, people are starting to make a distinction between, we're not FLDS or whatnot, but we're still kind of weird, and the church, I think, battled with that. How weird can we be until we're completely cut off, and they don't want to be cut off, and they have, as we know, they are everywhere in economics, finance and governments and everything, and they would not benefit from being cut off completely. Sometimes they act like they are and they want to, but the reality is they don't want to. They don't want to.
Let me ask you guys this, Sean, if it's all right, I really want to hear in Oakes's talk. He says, after the restriction was lifted, he says, he said the reasons that had been given to try to explain the prior restrictions on members of African ancestry, even those previously voiced by revered church leaders, were promptly and publicly disavowed. Is that true?
No.
Did the church promptly and publicly disavow all the past racist statements made by apostles and prophets? Julienna first.
Yeah.
The only disavow that I know that was public and heard, not even that public, because it was really subtle the way they did it, it's just a few years ago. That's the first time they ever disavowed anything. Like, I've never heard of disavowing whatsoever. Like, they just, they came up with the policy, everybody can have it. I don't recall anyone, I've been in the church my whole life. Like, I'm still officially a member. As to come back to your question, do I have a voice in here? Well, I'm still in the church, like officially. I don't go, but so anyways, my whole life in the church, and I've been everywhere. When I wasn't just in my little Belgium, I was on Salt Lake. I worked for the church. I read probably most talks than most people because I was with CES and whatnot. I have not heard or seen, any leaders. And tell me, people who are listening, send me information if I'm wrong, because I could perfectly be wrong or too young that I didn't hear it. But I've never heard of any disavowing of, anything close to what he did, to what Elder Oaks said today, that, I didn't feel good about what the other, on the pulpit, right? I'm not talking about people's opinion. I'm talking on the pulpit, general conference, conference talk, someone saying, I never felt right about what was said about people of color or written. Like, I haven't seen that anywhere, aside from the subtle, little disavowing that, came out because people were digging and shared through social media, but that was not even shared on the pulpit.
I think what matters in your case, Julienna, and in everyone's case is, did you ever hear it? Because you certainly were a member during that whole time. And you're saying in none of your experiences in the church, did you ever hear this comprehensive apology for racist justifications given by prophets and apostles? No, is that right, Julienna?
Never.
Absolutely.
Okay, Darren, I'll ask you.
Individual people, not the leaders on the pulpit or in general conference talk, which that's public. If you're going to say public, that's what it means.
Darren, how about you? You're next. Darren.
No, I've never heard any apology from any official gatherings where leadership would talk and put forth such information. Never heard it.
Not even apology, but just even saying it, like disavowing that disavowing.
No, really no conversation to really any degree at all.
Okay, Sean, you're next.
Bruce R. McConnell gave a speech in August 18th, 1978.
To who?
BYU.
It was to BYU, like CES or professors.
Absolutely. And this very famous quote where he says, "Forget everything that I have said or what Brigham said about the ban." Basically, he didn't say we were wrong, by the way. He just simply said, forget that stuff. There may have been another reason. But that's different than, go through the world and then reteach this. Although he's talking to CES. The thought is that it should have trickled down.
Yeah,
right?
That's not public enough to me. Like, if you're going to talk to one little group of people, that's not a worldwide.
I agree. I agree 100% that certainly. Here's how you know they didn't do enough is because we were all taught this racist stuff at some point, right? So certainly the memo didn't get all the way out.
And the contradictions too, guys, in terms of the theology of it itself. The church teaches, faith, repentance through, when you do something wrong, you make restitution, you go and you apologize, and and that's something that they're supposed to be putting forward as an organization. But they've not done that when it comes to, nothing that any fringe organization or fringe issue that would challenge their perception of the world, they're not going to do it.
No.
Who it is.
But Darren,
good.
Wait, Darren. The bottom line is that the church is based and rooted in white supremacy.
Right.
That is so blatantly, and here's the thing is, they almost can't back out of it. I'll give you an example. Recently, we got our first apostles of color. And until that point, here was my argument, which is that every white Mormon before that point should have been racist. And here's why. Because we're supposed to emulate Christ. We're supposed to try to be what Christ is, right? Up until that point, Christ had chosen 100 white men apostles in a row, according to the theology, right? Christ was a white supremacist, according to the theology. He looked all over the world's churches and could not find but white men as the important part. So of course, the members should be racist. If you're trying to emulate Christ, and Christ always picks white men, why wouldn't you always pick white men in your business, to be your doctor, to be your lawyer? Why would you be stupid and not be like Christ? The entire church has so much white supremacy built in it, right? The first thing you do when you become a Mormon is you get 2 or 3 shades lighter. I don't know how dark you were before we started. Right?
I think I've lightened up a little bit since I've been a member.
Yeah, Darren, when you were in the church, Darren, you like Steph Curry, because
John doesn't know if you should laugh about that or not. It's a joke, John. You can
I
laugh.
didn't think about that. The Lord did bless me and give me 2 shades lighter skin. You're right about that.
Yeah, and you come back. And no, in the seriousness, it's like I totally understand. I shouldn't say, I don't ever justify it, but once you get so much of that theology in you, etc., it's very difficult. All right, to pull all the parts out. Okay, well, because think about it, they had to say all this time. All right, we apologize for this thing, but the Lord's still going to keep picking white man for the next 40 years. All right, we're going to apologize for this, but our law firm is going to be all white people for the next 100 years, and all of our doctors are going to be white people. It's like it's so ingrained in everything in the church that if you pull out this one thread, it's like they're pulling the thread, right? And the whole thing collapses.
I was going to allow me to underscore this. I don't want to take any more time, but let me allow it just to kind of underscore. If you look back at some of the earlier writings of the so-called founding fathers in this country, right? It's apparent of their hatred for anything other than white male property owner. That includes women, people of color, lower status whites. There's even comparisons between the height of cemetery pillars. If you had more affluent, you had in the 1600s and 17th century. The higher the pillar, the more status. The lower the pillar, the less status. So that stuff was, like you said, literally built into the system. Literally, same-sex marriages, LGBTQ stuff, that a lot of stuff you deal with, John, that we all deal with. None of that stuff was conceived of when these white men came over here, pillaged and stole and took land and stole people's theft to build up the coffers of this nation off the backs of black people. They didn't conceive of any of this stuff, and so now we're playing catch up. And we continue to make the same damn mistakes, putting the same people in positions of power when we know good and well they've already been inculcated by white supremacy. You have to go through a process of cleansing. I don't want to say it in a spiritual, mystical sort of way, but you really have to learn to be woke. And it's hard to learn to be woke because when you woke, you start leaving friends, right? Friends start leaving you. You're going to start getting invited to their turkey dinner. You become the oddball out. You become an outlier if you read Malcolm Gladwell's book. You become an outlier.
I think John knows
I think that's what we are. We're outliers. We don't fit into the narrative.
I think John knows what that feels like to be an outlier, not in the sense that you describe, but to be rejected by your own. I do want to say something for the people of color that are still in the church. People like Gladys Knight, who we may have whatever opinion we want of her. I've actually met her. She's a wonderful woman. She has a huge heart, and I admire her for how much she's pushed the boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I met her a couple of years after she joined the church. Her family was there, and she's gotten a lot of bad press for it, right? To be a Mormon, because it's a white church, and she's heard it all. And I like how, she's her own person, and she does her. I do appreciate how she's been able to push the boundaries within the Mormon church. And as long as she has strength and energy to do so, she's helping so many people to just open up, loosen up, embrace others' ways of doing things, which, 20 years, like a Protestant choir sitting where the Mormon Tabernacle choir, stands with, the moment she got there, she did not let go of her style of preaching that she got from the South. I remember the first time she addressed the sisters, back in '99, I was serving on Temple Square. I took her and her whole family on a tour on Temple Square. She was meeting with President Hinckley. And,
you got some pictures? You got some pictures?
I did take some pictures with her. I lost them. But I remember. It doesn't matter. I remember. She held my hand throughout the whole hour. She was holding my hand throughout, and she was just so happy. And the church does bring joy to people. The church does bring a lot of goodness to people who maybe couldn't find it elsewhere. We're not discussing that, and I don't want to ever discuss that. But this is not the point of our discussion here. But what I want to say is, I am happy for, not just the people of color, but progressive people within the church who are woke, who know about all these things, who are, for whatever reason, they've chosen to stay, and I respect that. For me, it became too uncomfortable because I'm too mouthy, and I don't know, I had too many issues. But it's a hard thing. I have friends in the church that, struggle, but their family's there, and they do not want to. And for them to bring, to help push those boundaries, and even if it's little inch at a time, but I think you can see that. You can see that in that presentation, that program. You could see that. You could feel it. That
here's my only caveat. I'm sorry, Julianne. Here's my only caveat with that, and I agree with you. That was a beautiful utterance of what I used to say when I was, when I was trying to make sense of my experience in the church and why others would stay. It comes at a hell of a price to your health. A hell of a price to your health.
For some, some.
Your health take it. Yes.
For me, it did, because that's why I'm not in, because mentally I can't. It's the cognitive dissonance is too much. But for some, it's different. They have a different experience.
That's very true. That's very
true. And I respect that.
Julianna, when you talked about joy, and this is the thing that got me when I was looking at the video, and I love this, when Gladys's choir was there, and it was some African Americans and even some white members. Did you notice how much everybody was smiling during this?
Absolutely, it was happy.
At conference, and I was like, I wanted almost every member to see this and say, you know what? This does not have to be a funeral dirge every Sunday. This is not this mumbling thing. And that you can actually enjoy the music.
Yeah, it's different styles.
Especially if you got Gladys Knight. You got Gladys Knight leading it. I mean.
Yeah, but here's the thing is, you don't need all of like Gladys. I remember one time someone was talking to me about the Motab and how wonderful they are, and I said, I understand that. You realize that every black church can replicate that with two sisters and a gay choir director, right? We can do this. We don't need those kind of numbers. And the point is, we can enjoy this every Sunday. How about this? I say this: let people who can't sing clap. That's what we do in the black church. Every black person can't sing. We like to pretend that, but I can't carry a tune, in a Louis Vuitton case. All right, I can't carry a tune at all. But guess what I can do? I can clap. I can participate. And if we would allow that type of thing in our church, because I don't think the Lord would be offended by clapping. I imagine the Lord would be less offended by clapping than he would be by all.
Actually, if I remember right, the members of that event were given permission to clap. They basically said, this is a celebration.
They were.
And so because it's a celebration, you are allowed to clap. Let me ask you guys.
There was a lot of noise in there. There was a lot of noise in there.
Yeah.
And that music, in fact, I hope she's selling that music.
But even when she speaks, when Gladys Knight speaks, I remember one of her first speeches, she comes with such vibrancy. She comes with such, Southern energy that you want to say amen and alleluias, like people want to stand up. And in fact, people did clap and did express themselves because she has that energy. And she brings it, she carries it over wherever she goes. And she talks about it when she went into the interview. What you said, Sean, she said the same thing. She's like, hey, I'm gonna do my thing, I'm gonna, and she's like, follow me, don't follow me, but that I'm gonna be me here among you. And she stuck to it, and I love it.